When I was 3 months pregnant, my husband, Major Ben Miller, came to me and asked for a divorce. The reason he gave was that his widowed sister in law, Laura Reed, was also pregnant. Ben said he felt sorry for Laura, who had no one to look after her now that his brother was gone. He wanted to bring her along with his military unit to take care of her and the baby she was carrying. He tried to assure me that it would only be a fake divorce, a temporary arrangement, until Laura delivered her child and could manage on her own. He promised he would remarry me then. In my previous life, I had refused his absurd suggestion. My refusal sent me into a downward spiral as I desperately tried to hold on to our marriage. Because of my stubbornness, Laura went to the hospital for an abortion, but a complication during the procedure led to a fatal hemorrhage, and both she and the baby died. Ben was consumed by a deep, cold hatred for me after that. When I was 6 months pregnant, he and several others burst into my house and dragged me out of bed, where they had planted a local troublemaker to make it look like I was having an affair. I was publicly disgraced and shunned by everyone I knew. Ben successfully divorced me and had me sent to a labor reform camp. The days in that camp were unimaginably brutal. At 8 months pregnant, suffering from exhaustion and overwork, I went into labor prematurely. It was a difficult birth, and in the end, both my baby and I died on the cold floor of that labor farm. The sharp pain and overwhelming despair I felt in my final moments were still fresh in my mind when I suddenly heard Ben's voice again, gently asking me for a divorce. This time I didn't hesitate. There was no point in delaying the inevitable. It was better to get it over with quickly. I told him we should go and handle the paperwork immediately. I agreed to his terms without any resistance, but I had one condition. He had to give me $500 as child support. Ben agreed without a second thought. We went straight to the Civil Affairs Bureau, and when the official handed me our divorce certificate, I could see the unmistakable relief wash over Ben's face. He clearly hadn't expected me to be so cooperative. Now that the burden of our marriage was lifted, his attitude toward me softened. "Clara, don't worry," he said gently. "The divorce is only for a little while. Once I've settled things with Laura and the baby, I'll come back and we'll get married again." A cold, mocking smile touched my lips. I remembered all too well from my last life how Ben had cruelly schemed against me, all to avenge Laura Reed. Even a wild animal protects its own offspring, but Ben had been utterly ruthless toward me and our unborn child, all for Laura's sake. How could I possibly believe a single word he said now? In this new life, I wanted nothing more than to stay as far away from him as possible. I ignored his empty promises, gripped the divorce certificate tightly in my hand, and walked down the steps of the bureau. My coldness seemed to unnerve him, and he quickly followed me, his voice growing even softer. "Clara, now that I won't be around, you have to take good care of yourself and the baby. If you need anything at all, just let me know." Just as he was speaking to me in this gentle tone, Laura, who had been waiting for him outside, grew visibly upset. Her eyes darted between us, and then she suddenly crouched down, clutching her stomach. "Ow, my stomach hurts," she cried out. As soon as the words left her mouth, Ben's expression shifted to one of panic. He gave me no further thought, rushing straight to her side. He lifted her into his arms and ran toward the Jeep parked by the curb. As she clung to his neck, Laura looked over his shoulder and gave me a smug, provocative smile. She was flaunting her victory, making it clear that she held a far more important place in Ben's heart than I ever did. In my past life, I had been blind to just how deeply Ben cared for Laura. When he first proposed the divorce and his plan to take her with him, I had refused. I knew what kind of person Laura was in a way Ben apparently didn't. I had lived with her day and night. She was pretty and loved to dress up, always surrounded by admiring men. Even before she married Ben's younger brother, Daniel, she had plenty of suitors, and after their wedding, men continued to fawn over her. Back then, whenever Daniel wasn't home, I often saw Laura sneaking other men into the house. So, after Daniel died and Ben announced his intention to care for her and her unborn baby, I had warned him. I told him the child in her belly probably wasn't Daniel's. Ben didn't believe me. He scolded me for making baseless accusations and tarnishing Laura's reputation. I felt deeply wronged, unable to understand why he refused to believe me when I was telling the truth. It was only later that I learned the devastating reality. One of Laura's secret lovers was Ben himself. The shameless man had been having an affair with his own brother's wife all along. He treated the baby she was carrying as if it were his own, which is why he was so desperate to divorce me and give her a legitimate place by his side. In my past life, my blindness to the truth led to my own destruction. This time, I chose to step aside. I wanted to watch with my own eyes as Ben Miller and Laura Reed met the end they so richly deserved. It took me 2 full hours to walk home from the Civil Affairs Bureau. As I approached my house, I saw a man lurking suspiciously near the front door, peeking around nervously. I recognized him instantly. It was Rick Jones, the same thug I had been framed with in my past life. Seeing him there sent a chill down my spine. Why was he here? In my previous life, I had seen Rick Jones and Laura sneaking around together late at night more than once. I had even suspected that the child in Laura's belly belonged to him, a suspicion I had shared with Ben to no avail. After Laura's death, Rick had come to me, furious, vowing that I would pay for what happened. Not long after, Ben caught us together in that staged scene. The two of them, Rick and Ben, had set me up as revenge for Laura. They were both madly devoted to her in their own twisted ways. I wondered if either of them knew about the other's relationship with her. A cold smile spread across my face. If they ever found out they were just 2 members of Laura Reed's collection of men, I couldn't imagine the looks on their faces. As I was lost in thought, Rick walked briskly toward me, a wide grin on his face. "Hey, sis-in-law, where are you coming from?" I scoffed. "Where else? The divorce court." When he saw the divorce certificate in my hand, his eyes lit up with excitement. "You really divorced Ben?" "Yeah," I said casually. "Ben wants to take care of the baby in Laura's belly, so he forced me into it. He thinks I'm a fool, but I know exactly what's going on." Rick blinked. "What do you mean?" "What do I mean?" I sneered. "Ben and that tramp Laura are having an affair?" Rick looked stunned. I didn't stop there. And Laura isn't just sleeping with Ben. There's also Zach from the power plant, Kevin from the transit depot, and Lucas from the machine factory. I ticked them off on my fingers one by one. That girl has skills. 7 or 8 guys on the hook, and none of them have a clue who the father of her baby really is. Rick's face, which had been so thrilled just a moment before, turned pale as I named Laura's other supposed flings. He had always believed he was her one and only, and that the baby she carried was his. Rick might have been decent looking, but he was lazy and had no money. When Laura got pregnant, he couldn't support her, so they concocted a plan to trick Ben into thinking the baby was his deceased brother's and let him take responsibility. He had believed Laura marrying Ben was all part of their scheme. Now, realizing Ben and Laura's relationship wasn't so simple, his humiliation quickly turned to anger. In our last life, both Rick and Ben had blamed me for Laura's death and plotted together to destroy me. In this life, I wanted them to turn on each other. Humiliated and furious, Rick stormed off. I returned to the house, a smirk still on my face. Now that I was divorced from Ben, it was time to plan for my own future. First things first, the baby had to go. There was no way I was going to carry Ben Miller's child. Neither he nor Laura were decent people. They were a pair of conniving, heartless scum. To avoid the fate of my last life, I had to act first. Back in my room, I opened my trunk and took out all the cash I had saved, several hundred yuan, and carefully stitched it into the lining of my clothes. Just as I finished, Ben returned with Laura, who was draped all over him as if she had no bones in her body, moaning pathetically. When she saw me coming out of my room, she clung to Ben even tighter. "I can't walk. Help me back to my room," she whimpered. Ben didn't even try to hide their intimacy anymore. Right in front of me, he scooped her up and carried her into her room. Moments later, I could hear her sweet giggles floating through the walls. Eventually, Ben emerged. Without a trace of shame, he looked at me and said, "Laura's anemic. She needs some serious nourishment. Go buy a chicken and make her some soup." From the day I had married Ben Miller, I had never used a single cent of his money. Every penny he earned went to support his mother and younger brother. I used to think it was a sign of his filial piety and kindness. But now I knew better. He simply didn't care about me. He saw me as free labor, a maid for his family. In my last life, I hadn't realized how malicious he truly was until it was too late. Not this time. I looked him straight in the eye and calmly held up my hand. Fine, give me the money and I'll go buy the chicken for Laura. Ben was so used to ordering me around without offering anything in return that he didn't even flinch. He expected me to work for free. Can't you just cover it first? He snapped. I don't have any money, I replied flatly. What about your salary? It's all gone. I stared at him and reminded him slowly, sentence by sentence. I've been married to you for 3 years, and you have not once given me a single cent. Your mother comes by every few days asking for money for medicine and food. Do I look like I can magically make money appear? Where am I supposed to get it from? I kept my eyes on him as I spoke, my voice calm but firm. You promised me $500 in child support when we divorced. Give it to me now. Ben's expression twisted in anger. I don't have that much right now. Are you going back on your word? I asked coldly. You want to take care of Laura. I've already stepped aside and given you that chance. But you can't be this heartless. I'm carrying your child. You owe me that money and you need to hand it over right now. I didn't have to finish the threat. He knew exactly what I meant. If word got out that he and Laura had been sneaking around, it would be a huge scandal that could ruin his military career. He needed me to stay quiet. Grudgingly, Ben handed over the $500, then stormed off to the market to buy a chicken himself. The second Laura found out he had given me the hush money, she stopped pretending to be frail. She stomped over to me full of rage. Clara Evans, what gives you the right to take Ben's money? I let out a cold laugh and looked her straight in the eye. He owes me. He didn't want me spilling the truth about you two, so of course he had to pay me to keep my mouth shut. Laura hadn't expected me to be so blunt. She froze for a moment, then let out a carefree laugh. Oh, so you know. Well then, I won't hide it from you anymore. With smug pride, she said, Ben loves me, not you. Want to know the truth? On my wedding night with Daniel, I was with Ben. The confession was disgusting, but seeing my shocked reaction only made Laura happier. She continued with reckless abandon, spilling every detail of her affair with Ben. That night, Daniel was drunk and passed out. I didn't want to deal with him, so his mother, Martha, called Ben over to help. Right there, next to Daniel, Ben and I, well, we got together. It all made sense now. No wonder Ben was so determined to divorce me and give her a home. He probably thought he was the only man in her life, loving her so blindly that he refused to believe me when I told him about Rick and the others. I hoped that in this life, after he finally got what he wanted, he and Laura would stay together forever and suffer side by side. While I was lost in these thoughts, Laura's gaze dropped to my belly. Now that you know everything, you'd better stop dreaming about getting back with Ben. You should get rid of that baby. Why? I stared coldly at her. Ben said he'd remarry me. Why should I get rid of the baby? She snorted. You still think you'll have that baby? She sneered. Let me tell you something, Clara. Ben told me just now that he will never let that child be born. Within 3 days, he'll make sure your baby is gone with no place left to be buried. I believed every word she said. In our past life, Ben hadn't shown an ounce of mercy to me or our child. It seemed he was planning to do the exact same thing again. Well, if he wanted to go down the same cruel path, I would be ready for him. I would settle all my scores from both lives in one go. When Ben returned, he didn't just bring an old hen from the market. He brought his mother, Martha Miller, with him. As he went into the kitchen to prepare the chicken, Martha barged into my room, her narrow eyes glaring at me. I'm sick, she declared. I need to go to the provincial hospital. It's going to cost $500. Give it to me now. Ever since I married Ben, Martha had never treated me kindly. She always thought I wasn't good enough for her son. Her favorite was the sweet-talking Laura, who never gave her a dime but won her over with fake smiles and flattery. She still thought I was the same submissive girl she used to trample on. I looked her straight in the eye and replied coldly, If you need money, go ask your son Ben. Or better yet, go to your new daughter-in-law, Laura. Why are you asking me? Ben and I are divorced. I have no obligation to give you anything. She didn't expect my rejection. Her face twisted with rage. You cursed brat! How dare you talk back to me? Who gave you the nerve to ask Ben for that money? You should look in the mirror. Do you think you're worth that much? I narrowed my eyes. Whether I'm worth it or not isn't for you to decide. Your precious son and his darling Laura couldn't wait to be together, so they paid me off. That money was for my silence. You lying bitch, she shrieked. How dare you slander my son? I'll slap you. I shot up from my seat. I'd advise you to watch yourself. One shout from me in the yard, and the entire neighborhood will be buzzing about your family's little scandal by dinner time. Martha's face turned purple, but she knew I wasn't bluffing. She knew about the affair and understood that if it got out, it would ruin them all. After a long, bitter glare, she stomped out. It was clear Ben had brought her here to get the money back from me, but their plan had failed. They weren't going to give up easily, though. Soon after, Martha came storming back, ordering me into the kitchen to make the soup. Meanwhile, she, Ben, and Laura huddled in their room, whispering. I crept around the house and snuck up to the window, just in time to hear Martha's raspy voice. Clara knows about you and Laura. Now she's squeezing you for money. If we don't deal with this, we'll never have peace. Ben agreed. Yeah, I'm worried she'll keep making trouble. We have to find a way to put an end to this. Laura chimed in eagerly. Exactly. We need to take care of her before she causes more problems. Ben's voice dropped lower. At first, I was going to let her stay as long as she kept quiet. But now that she knows everything, we can't keep her around. We move tonight. You already have a plan? Martha asked. Yes, Ben confirmed. To stop her from exposing us, we strike first. I've already prepared the drug. All we need is to pin her with some man, make it look like she was cheating. They were planning to frame me again, just like in my last life. My lips curled into a cold smirk. Let's see who traps whom this time. I turned back toward the kitchen, where the rich smell of chicken soup now filled the air. I lifted the lid, picked out both drumsticks, the wings, and all the best breast meat, piling it into 2 big bowls. Then, I sat down and devoured it all, utterly satisfied. After I'd finished the meat and drank 2 full bowls of soup, Ben and Martha finally came into the kitchen, having finished their plotting. Martha, pretending to be kind, asked, Is the soup ready? Let's eat then. But the moment she saw the chicken bones on the floor, her face darkened. She rushed over and yanked the lid off the pot, only to find a pile of scavenged bones inside. Her face turned red with fury. You greedy tramp! There are so many people in this house, and you didn't think to save any for others? Fuming, she lunged at me, ready to hit me. I didn't back down. As she charged, I sidestepped and casually kicked a stool into her path. Martha lost her balance and fell hard, her face landing right on the edge of the stool. There was a sickening crack and a scream as her front teeth went flying, blood spraying across the floor. She howled in pain, clutching her bleeding mouth. Ben, kill this ungrateful witch! Hit her now! But Ben didn't move. Not because he didn't want to, but because he still needed his plan for tonight to work. He clenched his fists, glared at me, and roared, Clara Evans, you've gone too far. How dare you hurt my mother? He shouted and then helped Martha out of that kitchen. The commotion drew Laura over from the hallway. Ben and Laura flanked Martha, helping her as she walked out of the house, wailing at full volume. She shouted about how I didn't care for the family, how I yelled at her, and how today I'd even laid hands on her. It was a coordinated performance, designed to paint me as an abusive daughter-in-law, so that when they sprang their trap later, no one would have any sympathy for me. If they were going to play dirty, then so was I. Tonight, we would see who came out on top. At 7 o'clock that evening, Ben and the others returned. I sat quietly in my room waiting. Half an hour later, Ben pushed open the door, holding a bowl of brown sugar eggs. His face wore a rare, gentle smile. You must be hungry. I made this for you, he said. I know the divorce has been hard on you, Clara, but there's nothing going on between me and Laura, I swear. I'm only helping her out because of Daniel. And my mom, well, that's just how she is. Don't take it to heart. If this were the Clara from my previous life, those words would have moved me to tears. But I had already died once. I stared coldly at him. No one told me about your affair with Laura. She told me herself. Said the 2 of you were together right next to Daniel on your wedding night. Ben's face froze. He quickly forced a smile. She's lying. You can't believe her. I'm not that kind of man. Why would she lie? I asked. Why would anyone say something so filthy about themselves unless it were true? She even said the baby in her belly is yours. That's impossible, Ben stammered. I'll go ask her right now. Afraid I'd say more, he quickly shoved the bowl into my hands. Clara, eat the eggs first. Then I'll bring Laura here and we'll explain everything. He needed to see me eat the drugged eggs before he could relax. Fine. I took the bowl and, without hesitation, ate every last bite right in front of him. Ben visibly relaxed. He picked up the empty bowl, smiled, and told me to get some rest. I obeyed, taking off my slippers and lying down in bed. As he left, I saw a smug grin on his face. Half an hour later, a shadowy figure crept up and pushed open my slightly ajar bedroom door. About 15 minutes after that, Martha snuck over and pressed her ear to my door. When she heard the squeaking of bed springs under a heavy weight, her face lit up with a triumphant grin. She turned and ran, cursing me under her breath. Fueled by hatred, she ran to the neighbor's house and started pounding on the door. Mr. Chen, Laura's stomach is acting up and Ben had to leave for something urgent. Could you and your wife help me get her to the hospital? Mr. Chen readily agreed, but Martha didn't stop there. Using the excuse that it was dark and they needed more help, she gathered 4 or 5 other neighbors as well. Within minutes, a group of more than 10 people followed her back to our house. But she didn't lead them to Laura's room. Instead, she turned toward mine. She pounded on the door. Clara, Laura's in pain. Bring out a military coat for her to wear. Without waiting for a response, she shoved the door open and let out a piercing shriek. Who is that? Why is there a man in your bed? Clara Evans, you filthy whore. How could you cheat on Ben? She screamed as she rushed over and yanked the blanket off the bed, expecting to reveal a scandalous scene. But when the blanket was pulled back, there was no man. In fact, I wasn't even there. All that lay on the bed was a large, stuffed suitcase. Martha froze, completely speechless. The neighbors who had gathered to witness the drama exchanged puzzled glances. Did you just say Clara was cheating? One of them asked. Martha stood there, stunned. She couldn't explain what had happened. She had let the man in herself, or so she thought. She had heard the bed creaking. Now everyone wondered where the man, and I, had vanished. Just then, my voice rang out from outside, shrill and heart-wrenching. I can't live like this anymore. Ben Miller, you heartless bastard, you're sleeping with Laura Reed. How can you even call yourself a man? The group that had gathered outside my room instantly turned and ran toward the sound of my voice. Laura's bedroom door was wide open. Inside, I was swinging a rolling pin with wild fury at Ben, who was huddled on the floor, bleeding from his face. Even so, he clung desperately to Laura. I beat him harder, screaming, "Weren't you supposed to be out on some urgent errand? So this is your errand? Straight into Laura's bed?" I turned on Laura next. "And you disgusting thing. I treated you like a sister and this is how you repay me? By crawling into bed with your brother-in-law?" I pointed at them and cried out to the onlookers, "You all see it now. Ben Miller and Laura Reed. Do you think this is the first time? They've been doing this behind my back for who knows how long." Seeing the scene with their own eyes and hearing my emotional accusations, the crowd erupted. "This is beyond disgraceful," someone cried. "His wife is still pregnant, and he's doing this with his own sister-in-law." The murmurs grew louder. Vile, shameless, no morals at all. As Ben and Laura cried out, people noticed they were locked together in a strange, inseparable posture. Someone gasped, "They're stuck! They're locked together, my God!" As they cried out in agony, I kept sobbing and shouting, fueling the fire of 2 lifetimes of hatred. He told me he was just helping his brother's widow. He promised he'd come back and remarry me. And I, stupid naive me, I believed him. I glanced at Laura's belly and shouted, "Daniel has only been dead for 3 months, but she's 2 months pregnant. Don't tell me it's not Ben's child." "Of course it's his," someone in the crowd muttered. "Poor Daniel, his bones must still be cold in the ground." The accusations flew. Martha, frantic, tried to shoo people away, but no one would leave the juicy spectacle she herself had orchestrated. More neighbors kept streaming in, drawn by the commotion. The house was packed shoulder to shoulder. It was over. Martha knew the situation had spiraled out of her control. Seeing her son covered in blood, she finally snapped and lunged at me, shoving me violently. Exhausted, I let out a cry of pain and collapsed, clutching my belly. My baby! My baby! I screamed. Neighbors scrambled to help. Seeing blood, they quickly carried me to the hospital. Of course, there was no saving the child. I had already taken abortion pills in advance. From the moment I was reborn, I never intended to keep this baby. The entire scene was a battlefield I had meticulously planned. The moment I overheard their plot, I knew what I had to do. I provoked Martha with the chicken soup, knowing she would lose her temper. I let them set the stage by publicly accusing me of being abusive. When Ben brought the drugged soup, I ate it, knowing it was a fake I had switched earlier. The real drug, an aphrodisiac, I had mixed into the powdered milk that I knew Laura drank every night. When Rick Jones snuck into my room, I was waiting with a brick. I slammed it into his head, then hit him again and again in his lower body, ensuring he would never harm another woman. After dragging his unconscious body to the outhouse, I went to Laura's room. The drug had taken effect, and just as I burst in with the rolling pin, her body seized up, locking her to Ben just as the crowd rushed in. At the hospital, I was taken into surgery for a minor procedure to complete the miscarriage. Ben and Laura were rushed to the emergency room as well, the scandal following them like a storm. Hundreds of people reportedly followed them, the crowd swelling with every block. It took a team of doctors significant effort just to separate them. As I stepped out of the operating room, the entire hospital was buzzing with gossip about the military officer and his sister-in-law. I went straight to a phone and dialed the military's complaint hotline, reporting Ben Miller for moral corruption and violating military discipline. Only then did I return to my room to rest. I didn't have to wait long for more news. Mrs. Chen, one of our neighbors, came to visit. Clara, Ben just came out of surgery and got beaten up again. Really? Who hit him? I asked calmly. Who else? The Jones family. They showed up and beat the crap out of him, broke 3 of his ribs and busted one of his eyes. She leaned in and told me the whole story. Rick's family had found him by the outhouse, a ruined man. When he woke up, he told them everything. How he and Laura had been involved, how she told him the baby was his, and how she had sent him to my room that night to assault me as revenge. That Laura, Mrs. Chen sighed. She's even filthier than we thought. The neighbors, and now Rick's family, all believed it was Ben who must have attacked Rick in a jealous rage. The Tuckers, not a family to be trifled with, took their own revenge. Mrs. Chen told me they didn't spare Laura either. They cornered her, and after a brutal beating, she suffered a massive hemorrhage, lost the baby, and had to have her uterus removed. She could never have children again. To me, it was the sweetest news I could have hoped for. The military's investigation team arrived the next day. With the whole town talking, their work was easy. Ben was dishonorably discharged on the spot. I heard he let out a miserable wail and passed out when he heard the news. 3 days later, I was discharged. When I got home, I found Martha in my kitchen. She looked 10 years older, her face covered in bruises from the Jones family's wrath. You dare come back here? She snarled. I grabbed her by the hair, smacked her across the face, and dragged her out the front door. This is my house, I shouted. If you ever step foot in here again, I'll beat you every single time. She called the police, but I showed them my divorce certificate and the deed to the house, which my parents had left me. They sympathized with me, the clear victim, and told Martha to leave and never come back. My revenge was complete, but I knew that cornered dogs could be dangerous. To avoid any retaliation from Ben or Rick's family, I knew I couldn't stay. I sold my house and my job at a low price and bought a train ticket south to a city full of new beginnings. Using the money, I started a small clothing business. It began with a street stall, then a shop, and within 3 years, I had my own brand and several storefronts. I was my own boss. One autumn evening, I ran into Mrs. Chen. She looked older, but her face lit up with joy when she saw me. I invited her to dinner, and she told me the factory where she worked had shut down. I needed help at my store, so I offered her a job, which she happily accepted. Over dinner, she told me what had happened after I left. 2 weeks later, Ben was kicked out of the hospital, unable to pay his bills. He returned to our old house only to find it sold. With nowhere else to go, he and Martha returned to their rural hometown. Expelled, jobless, and blind in one eye, he couldn't handle the humiliation and became violent toward his mother. He pinned all his hopes on Laura, believing she owed him after everything he had sacrificed. But the woman who once admired his status now looked at the broke, disfigured man with nothing but disgust. She told him the brutal truth. He was just one of many, and the baby was never his. It was Rick's. Ben lost his mind. He beat Laura viciously. That's when Rick's family arrived, demanding Laura spend the rest of her life caring for the man she had ruined. Compared to the crippled Ben, Rick was the better option, so Laura chose him, abandoning Ben without a second thought. Humiliated and beaten once again by Rick's family, Ben returned to the countryside, burning with hatred. Half a month later, he came back with a pig-slaughtering knife. He broke into Rick's house and killed them both. He didn't try to run. He turned himself in, was sentenced to death, and was executed 6 months later. I wasn't surprised. A man as cruel as Ben was capable of anything. It was why I had left. I had already died at his hands once and wasn't going to risk it again. But now, they were all gone. Finally, I could breathe. With the toxic people who had destroyed my first life gone forever, I was free to enjoy the life I had rebuilt with my own 2 hands. This time, I would be happy.